The hospital corridors echoed with panic. "Doctor, her heart rate is dropping. Fast." A nurse screamed, her trembling hands gripping the monitor wires. The flatline beep tore through the room like a siren of death. Another nurse pushed through the chaos. "Doctor, we're losing her." The lead surgeon barked, "Scalpel, now!" His voice shook, not from uncertainty, but from the unimaginable terror of what he was about to face. The room was suffocating with fear. Bright surgical lights bore down on the unconscious woman lying on the table, her face pale, her chest rising only with the help of machines. Beads of sweat ran down the foreheads of nurses as alarms screamed from every corner of the room. Then, suddenly, the surgeon's gloved hands froze. His eyes widened. His breathing hitched. He leaned closer, staring at the side of her head. That's when the others saw it too. The small, swollen bump on her ear. The thing that had brought her here tonight. It didn't look ordinary anymore. The skin stretched unnaturally, dark veins spiderwebbing out like roots beneath the flesh. "Doctor," whispered one nurse, her voice cracking. What is that?" The surgeon didn't answer. His jaw clenched. His eyes darted to the monitors. Her pulse was crashing. Scissors. Forceps. Now. His tone was sharp, commanding, but underneath, it carried something else. A tremor. A fear no one had ever heard from him before. The nurse handed over the tools with shaking fingers. The air thickened. Even the sound of the machines felt muffled, as if the room itself was holding its breath. Then it happened. The moment the scalpel touched her ear, something moved beneath the skin. The nurses gasped. One step back, covering her mouth. The beeping monitors accelerated, her body convulsing. And then, with one precise cut, the ear opened. The room fell silent. The surgeon's hands froze. The nurses screamed. What they saw inside was something no one in the room would ever forget. Something that didn't belong in the human body. Something that left every single person paralyzed with terror. But what exactly was it? The room pulsed with silence after the nurses' screams. Only the rhythmic hiss of the ventilator and the faint beeping of the monitors reminded everyone that the woman was still alive. The surgeon leaned in, eyes locked on the grotesque opening he had just made on her ear. His hands, steady from decades of surgeries, trembled ever so slightly. At first glance, it looked like nothing more than a swollen cyst. But now it was alive. The flesh quivered, as if something beneath it had been waiting for this very moment. "Doctor," the young resident whispered, voice barely audible. "Is that normal?" The surgeon didn't answer. He took the forceps, slid them into the small incision, and carefully spread the tissue. His breath grew heavier. The veins bulging across the skin throbbed with each faint heartbeat, almost as though they were feeding something inside. The nurse at his side gagged and turned away, pressing a hand over her mouth. Another one clutched the tray, so hard the instruments rattled. And then it twitched again. Something beneath the skin shifted violently, pressing against a thin layer of flesh like a creature trapped in a cage. One nurse stumbled backward, knocking over a stool. "Oh my God, it's moving," she cried. The surgeon gritted his teeth. "Hold her steady." Two assistants pinned the woman down as her body jerked uncontrollably. The monitors screamed louder, her pulse spiking, then crashing again. With a single motion, the surgeon widened the incision. The skin split open further, blood welling at the edges. And that's when everyone saw it. Not pus, not fluid, not even infection. Something solid, something foreign, something that should never, under any circumstances, be inside a human ear. The resident gasped. It's impossible." The surgeon pulled back slightly, his voice low and shaken. "This isn't medical. This is something else entirely." The nurses exchanged terrified glances, unsure whether to stay or run. The patient's body convulsed harder, her face contorting in silent agony even under anesthesia. The thing inside wasn't just sitting there. It was fighting to stay hidden. The surgeon tightened his grip on the forceps, sweat dripping from his forehead. He knew he had no choice. He had to remove it. But with each second, the patient's vitals dropped lower. The flatline alarm was waiting seconds away, and as he braced himself to pull the thing out, one question haunted every soul in that room. What if removing it killed her instantly? The monitors suddenly screamed. Beep, beep, beep. Then a chilling flatline. The surgeon's head snapped toward the screen. The green line stretched into a single, unbroken scream of death. "She's coding!" shouted a nurse, already grabbing the crash cart. "Get the paddles, now!" the doctor barked. Two nurses yanked open drawers, scrambling for adrenaline syringes and 4 lines. The patient's body lay limp, her skin paling rapidly as the life drained from her. "Start compressions." A young intern climbed onto the stool and pressed both hands hard against the woman's chest, pumping furiously. The sound of cracking ribs echoed, sharp, terrifying, but no one dared stop. "Charge to 200, the doctor commanded. The defibrillator pads were slapped onto her chest. A nurse smeared gel, her hands trembling. Clear. The body jolted violently with the electric shock. Once. Twice. Nothing. "Doctor, no response," cried the resident, panic rising in his voice. The surgeon grabbed a syringe. "Epinephrine 1 milligram. For push." He jabbed it directly into her line. His jaw tightened as he glanced at the open wound on her ear, that unnatural object still buried within. He knew, whatever this was, it wasn't just killing her slowly. It was killing her now. The nurses looked at each other, pale and horrified. One whispered shakily, "What if it's connected? What if removing it was keeping her alive?" "Don't think. Just focus," the doctor snapped. His mask couldn't hide the sweat soaking his face. "Charge to 300. Clear." Another brutal shock surged through her body. Her arms twitched. Her head jerked to the side. The flat line continued. The intern's voice cracked. "Doctor, we're losing her." The room grew louder, beeping, shouting, the rhythm of compressions, the heavy breaths of the medical team fighting against time itself. And then, a flicker. The flat line jumped. A faint pulse returned. Weak, fragile. But there. "She's back!" A nurse cried, tears welling in her eyes. But the victory was short-lived. Her blood pressure plummeted again. The mysterious thing inside her ear pulsed unnaturally, almost as though it had a life of its own, sinking with her heart. The surgeon stared at it, horrified. This wasn't just a growth. This wasn't just a pimple. It was something keeping her between life and death. And if they didn't understand it soon, she wouldn't survive the next flat line. Before the flashing monitors. Before the scalpels. Before the screams. She was just a woman. Her name was Elena, 46 years old, a mother, a wife, and the kind of person neighbors described as the heart of the street. On quiet evenings, Elena would sit on the porch with her husband, Daniel, sipping tea while their children played on the lawn. She laughed easily, her voice carrying warmth that could melt even the hardest of days. Her teenage daughter, Sophia, often leaned against her shoulder, complaining about school boys and the small dramas of adolescence. Elena listened, patient and kind, never brushing her off. Her youngest, little Mateo, just 7, was glued to her side. He adored her. He'd sneak into her bed at night, whispering, "Mom, don't ever leave me, okay?" And she'd smile, kiss his forehead, and promise, "Never, my love. I'll always be here." She kept that promise the best she could. But promises don't stop disease. It had started months ago. Just a tiny bump on her ear. Nothing worth worrying about, or so she told herself. When Daniel urged her to see a doctor, she laughed it off. "It's just a pimple, don't be silly. I'll be fine." But he saw the way she winced when brushing her hair, the way her earrings no longer fit comfortably, the way her smile sometimes faltered when the pain pulsed through her head. Still, Elena refused to go. Why? Because money was tight. Daniel's job at the factory had slowed, and Elena worked double shifts at the diner to keep food on the table. Doctor visits felt like luxuries. She put her family first. Always. She ignored the pain, ignored the swelling, ignored the strange nights when she swore she felt something crawling just beneath her skin. Until one day, while cooking dinner, her daughter gasped, "Mom, your ear, it's bleeding." Elena touched it and saw dark streaks on her fingers. Fear flashed across her face, but she wiped it away quickly, smiling through the pain. "I'm okay. Don't worry." But the children did worry. They cried when she worked late, begged her to rest, pleaded with her to see a doctor. And now, here she was, on a cold steel table, machines keeping her alive. Her family sat in the waiting room, clinging to one another, unaware of the nightmare doctors had just uncovered. The woman who had given them everything, love, sacrifice, and hope, was now dangling on the edge of death, and no one yet knew the true horror of what was inside her. Elena had always been the strong one, the mother who never got sick, the wife who worked through exhaustion, the friend who said, "Don't worry about me, I'll be fine." But behind closed doors, she wasn't fine. The bump on her ear had started to change. At first, it was no bigger than a pea. She'd cover it with her hair, brush past a mirror quickly so she wouldn't have to look at it. But then weeks turned into months. The bump grew harder, darker. The skin stretched unnaturally tight, turning red, then purple. Sometimes it leaked fluid. Other times it throbbed so violently it kept her awake at night. Daniel begged her, "Elena, please, go to the doctor. This isn't normal." She'd smile faintly and shake her head. "We can't afford it right now. It's nothing. Don't scare the kids." But deep down she was terrified. At night, when everyone slept, Elena would sit in the bathroom with the door locked. She'd stare at the bump in the mirror, her hands trembling as she touched it. Sometimes she swore she felt it pulse under her fingertips. Other times, she thought she heard something faint, a sound, like a soft clicking or scratching. She convinced herself it was her imagination, that it was stress, that it was just a cyst. But the truth was darker. Her body was sending warnings, blinding headaches, dizziness, sudden nosebleeds. One evening, during Mateo's birthday party, she collapsed in the kitchen. The cake knife clattered to the floor. Everyone screamed. She brushed it off, laughing nervously. "I just stood up too fast. Don't worry, I'm fine." But she wasn't fine. She was getting worse. Her daughter Sophia cried in her bedroom that night. "Mom's lying. Something's wrong." And she was right. Elena hid the truth because she didn't want to burden them. But secrets have a way of growing. By the time she finally agreed to see a doctor, it was too late. The pain had spread. Her ear was swollen grotesquely, the skin discolored, veins crawling outward like dark roots. The doctor's expression had shifted from casual concern to quiet alarm. Tests were ordered immediately. But before results even came back, her body gave out. She collapsed at work, gasping for air, blood trickling from her ear. That's how she ended up here. And now, in the sterile operating room, surgeons stare at the very thing she had hidden for months. A thing that wasn't just dangerous. It was unnatural. And the longer they looked, the more they realized. This wasn't a pimple. It was something no human should ever carry inside. The scalpel hovered. The surgeon's breath grew ragged as he pressed deeper into the swollen ear. Blood welled up, thick and dark, dripping onto the sterile cloth below. The nurses leaned forward, their eyes wide, knuckles white against the metal trays. Then, something moved again. Not a twitch of muscle, not a nerve reaction. Something alive. The surgeon froze. His gloved hand tightened on the forceps. With a sharp tug, he widened the incision, and that's when the nightmare revealed itself. A slick, writhing shape pushed outward from the wound. The nurse closest to the table screamed, stumbling back and knocking over the instrument tray. The metallic clatter echoed like thunder in the tense room. "Oh my God, what'd I ask that?" one nurse cried. The thing slithered out an inch, then two, glistening under the surgical lights. Long, pale, pulsing. It wasn't tissue. It wasn't infection. It was a worm, not a small parasite, not the kind you read about in textbooks. This one was monstrous. Thick as a finger, wriggling violently, its body twisting as though fighting to stay buried inside her. The surgeon yanked with the forceps. The creature stretched, resisted, then tore free with a wet snap. Blood splattered across his gown. The nurses shrieked. One ran for the door, gagging into her mask. Another whispered shakily, That came out her ear?" The surgeon dropped it into a tray. The thing writhed, slapping against the steel, alive and furious. Its segmented body coiled, then thrashed so hard the tray nearly tipped. "Kill it," one nurse shouted. But the surgeon raised a hand. "No, we need to know what it is." His voice trembled. Even he couldn't hide the horror. He looked back at Elena's ear, and his blood turned cold, because the wound wasn't empty. Another movement, then another. The skin bulged as more shapes pressed against it, writhing beneath the surface. "They're everywhere," the resident whispered in disbelief, his face pale. The surgeon's heart pounded. He reached in again, pulling harder. Another parasite burst free, then another, sliding out in a grotesque stream of wriggling flesh. The tray filled. The nurses screamed. The smell was unbearable, a sickly mix of rot and iron. One nurse fainted. Another pressed herself against the wall, hands over her ears, as if shutting out the sight would make it go away. The surgeon stared down at the horror spilling from Elena's body. His voice shook with a mixture of fear and awe. "These aren't just worms," he whispered. "They've been living inside her, feeding on her. For months, maybe years. And the worst part? The way they pulsed, every movement matched her heartbeat, as though her body had become their host. Her survival and her death were tied to them." The room fell silent, the horror hanging in the air like a curse. The question no one dared speak aloud was this. If so many were hiding in her ear, where else in her body were they living? The horror in the operating room begged one question. How could something like this end up inside her? To answer it, we go back, months before the nightmare unfolded. Elena lived a simple life, but it wasn't without struggle. She worked at a small diner on the edge of town, often taking the night shifts. The place was old, its walls stained from decades of grease and smoke, its corners crawling with insects no matter how much bleach she poured down the drains. The staff joked about it. "If the cockroaches don't kill us, the customers will." Elena would laugh too, though inside she hated it. She hated the way the back alleys smelled of rot, the way she often brushed flies away from her hair during her break. One night after a long shift, she came home exhausted. She showered quickly, collapsed into bed, and never noticed a tiny mark just behind her ear. A bite, small, barely visible. At first, she thought nothing of it. Just a mosquito, maybe a spider. But over the days, it itched, swelled, and then grew. What Elena didn't know was that something far worse than an insect bite had entered her body that night. Somewhere in that diner alley, or maybe in the crates of imported food she handled, lurking parasites had found their way to her. They were rare, almost unheard of in her part of the world. But once inside, they did what parasites do best. They fed, they multiplied, and they hid. Every time she ignored the pain, they grew stronger. Every time she told her children she was fine, the creatures burrowed deeper, weaving themselves into her tissue, sinking with her bloodstream. And when her ear began to swell grotesquely, she wasn't just ignoring an infection. She was ignoring an invasion. Her fear of burdening her family had given these monsters time to thrive. By the time she collapsed at work, it wasn't just her ear they had claimed. The parasites had made her body their home. And now, under the blinding hospital lights, as doctors pulled them out one by one, the horrifying truth became clear. This wasn't just a medical emergency. This was a war inside Elena's body. And no one knew yet if she had already lost. It didn't take long for whispers to leave the operating room. By morning, the story had spread through the hospital halls. A woman with worms inside her ear. Nurses couldn't keep quiet. Interns sent frantic texts to friends. Within hours, local reporters swarmed the hospital entrance. Cameras flashed. Microphones shoved forward. Headlines screamed across news stations. Parasites found inside woman's ear. Rare infection or something else? Doctors shocked by horrific discovery. Daniel and the children were ambushed outside the hospital. Cameras caught Sophia crying, her small voice trembling as she begged, "Please, Just let my mom live." The public was horrified. Social media erupted. Some called it a tragedy, a nightmare no family should face. Others speculated wildly. Was this negligence? Was the hospital hiding something? An investigation was launched. Health officials demanded answers. Police were called in to secure the operating room, treating it like a crime scene. The surgeon who had pulled the parasites from Elena's ear was interrogated for hours. "Doctor," one official asked sternly, "how long could this infestation have gone unnoticed?" He rubbed his temples, his eyes bloodshot from sleepless nights. "Months, maybe years. But we've never seen anything like this. Not here. Not in this country." The diner where Elena worked came under fire. Inspectors stormed the kitchen, tearing apart crates, shining flashlights into drains. The owner shouted in protest, but photographs leaked online. Moldy walls, crawling insects, boxes of spoiled produce. Outrage exploded. People demanded the place be shut down. Some even accused the owner of covering up unsanitary conditions that nearly killed Elena. Conspiracy theories grew darker. Was this a freak infection? Or something more sinister? A government cover-up? An experiment gone wrong? Through it all, Elena lay unconscious, machines keeping her alive, completely unaware that her suffering had ignited a storm far beyond her family. The world wanted answers. The law wanted accountability. And the hospital wanted distance. But for the surgeon standing at her bedside, none of that mattered, because even as officials argued and reporters shouted, he could see the truth with his own eyes. The parasites weren't done yet. Her body still moved with them. And if she didn't fight soon, there would be nothing left to save. The night stretched endlessly in the ICU. Machines beeped softly, a haunting rhythm that carried both hope and dread. Elena lay motionless, pale as marble, tubes and wires snaking from her body. Her family was allowed in, one by one. Daniel sat beside her first, clutching her hand, whispering, "You promised me forever. Elena, don't you dare leave me now." His tears dripped onto her skin, but her fingers never moved. Sophia followed, her voice cracking. "Mom, I need you. Please, don't leave me like this." She pressed her head against her mother's arm, sobbing until the nurses gently pulled her away. Lil Mateo's turn came last. He climbed onto the chair, staring at the wires in confusion. His small hand reached for hers, trembling. "Mom, remember? You said you'd always be here." His lip quivered. "Don't break your promise." And then something happened. Her finger twitched. The monitors beeped irregularly. Doctors rushed in, shouting orders. Daniel froze, staring at her hand. She moved. I swear she moved. Her chest rose more steadily. The weak pulse began to strengthen. Her eyelids fluttered, fighting against the weight of unconsciousness. "Come on, Elena," the surgeon whispered at her side. His voice cracked for the first time in years. "Fight. Don't let them win." Suddenly, her eyes opened. The room erupted. Nurses gasped. Daniel shouted her name. Sophia sobbed in relief. Mateo clung to her arm, crying, "Mommy." Elena's lips trembled. The words barely escaped her throat, but they were enough. "I'm here." Tears streamed down every face in the room. Against every odd, against every warning, Elena had clawed her way back from the brink. But the miracle wasn't just that she woke up. Doctors confirmed what none of them thought possible. The parasites had been fully removed. Her body was weak, but stable. The invasion that had nearly stolen her life was finally gone. For the first time in months, her body was hers again. The surgeon exhaled a breath he didn't realize he was holding. He glanced at the family, and in that moment, the room was no longer filled with fear, only gratitude. Elena had survived, and her survival was nothing short of a miracle. Weeks later, Elena walked out of the hospital, her steps slow but steady, her family surrounding her like a fragile treasure they'd almost lost. Cameras flashed as reporters shouted questions, but she ignored them. She didn't care about headlines or blame or investigations. All that mattered was the warmth of Daniel's hand holding hers, the sound of Sophia's laughter as she clung to her mother's arm, The way little Mateo refused to let go, his small fingers gripping her sleeve like he'd never loosen them again. She was alive, and that was enough. But her story carried a lesson, one she would never stop sharing, because Elena had ignored her body's warnings. She had silenced her pain to protect her family. She had chosen sacrifice over care, and almost paid for it with her life. In a small interview months later, her voice still soft but steady, she said, "If I could go back, I would have listened to my husband, to my children, to the pain. We think we're strong when we endure it, but real strength is asking for help before it's too late." Her words struck millions. Her story spread far beyond her city. People whispered about the parasites, yes, but more importantly, they remembered the woman who had almost died because she put herself last. And they remembered the miracle of her survival. The hospital eventually calmed. The legal battles faded. The diner shut its doors. But Elena's lesson lived on. Health is not a burden. Pain is not weakness. And love means fighting for yourself, because your family needs you alive. In the quiet of her home, with Daniel's arm around her and her children safe beside her, Elena whispered one last line that became the story's closing echo. "I thought I had to be unbreakable, but I learned that even broken, I am worth saving." And with that, the nightmare finally ended.